Wow.
That was a great story, Kiki.
Yeah. All I can think of is that doll's head smiling. Ew.
Very creepy.
Glad you guys like.
So, I guess it's my turn, right?
Yeah. What have you got for us, Sam?
Well, okay. I was thinking the other day about ghosts and haunted houses.
Cool.
Sounds good to me.
You know how creepy it is when you hear something but you don't know what it is? Well, just imagine a door. It's locked, right? And that means nothing can get through it. Nothing human, that is. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call the story The Tale of the Locked Door. Lisa was alone with her brother Sean in a tiny cabin in Vermont. This vacation was supposed to be fun, but the place was totally creepy. It was full of cobwebs with dead bugs in them. The wind howled in the old chimney. Plus, there was that weird locked door at the bottom of the cellar stairs. Lisa didn't like that at all. She looked out the window. It was snowing hard, and the sky was so dark it looked black. "It's late," she said. "Why isn't Dad back yet?" Their dad had left on skis that afternoon to buy groceries in town. "Chill out," said Sean. "He'll be back soon." The wind howled again. Or was it something else? "What was that?" asked Lisa. "What was what?" Sean was flipping through an old magazine. He didn't even bother to look up. "This place gives me the creeps," said Lisa. "I wish Dad didn't tell us about that guy." "The one who used to live here," said Sean. "So some geezer gets lost in a blizzard. Big deal." "But it could happen to Dad," said Lisa. Sean groaned. "Get real," he said. The wind shrieked in the chimney, but there was another sound, too. "Listen," said Lisa suddenly. "Do you hear it now?" Sean looked up. There really was something. It sounded like fingernails scrabbling on a wooden board, and a whimpering sound. Together, Lisa and Sean stared down the rickety steps leading to the cellar. "It's coming from behind that door," she whispered. Sean made his hands into claws. "It's the abominable snowman! He's coming to get you!" "Cut it out," hissed Lisa. Okay, the door was clearly locked tight with a rusty bolt and padlock. But something was wrong. "Look," she whispered, pointing. The door was shaking slightly, and the scrabbling, whimpering noises were louder. "It's just the wind," said Sean. But he didn't sound so sure. The door suddenly shook violently. "That's not the wind," said Lisa. She felt sick to her stomach. The old lock jolted with the impact. "Don't be stupid," said Sean. "What could it possibly be but the..." Then suddenly the lock snapped off with a crack. The door burst open, and with a deafening roar, a gigantic thing came hurtling up the stairs, dripping with jaws open wide. Sean screamed and fell backwards, but Lisa saw immediately what it was. It was just a dog, a big old St. Bernard with an old leather collar around its neck. "Get away!" screamed Sean, covering his face. "No!" shouted Lisa. It's okay. See? It's just a dog." She put out her trembling hand and the dog licked it. She hesitantly patted it, and its tail thumped. "It's okay, Sean. He's not going to hurt us." The dog ran to the front door and scratched on it, whimpering. "See," said Lisa. "He just wants to go out." But how did he get down there in the first place?" said Sean, totally confused. "Why didn't we hear it?" Lisa opened the door and the dog bounded out into the snow. Curtains of white flakes swirled out of the dark sky, but the dog didn't seem to mind. It just plunged into the drifts, then stopped, lifted its head, and howled. "I think he wants something," said Lisa. The dog howled again. It turned and looked at Lisa, and then faintly, Lisa heard something. Was it a man calling? "Listen," she shouted. "There's someone out there." "I don't hear anything," said Sean. Lisa grabbed her down jacket. "Let's go," she said. "No way," said Sean. "Are you nuts?" Lisa glared at him. "I don't care if you're too scared," she said, "but I'm going to follow him." All right, said Sean. He grabbed his big red flashlight, and his coat. The two headed out into the snow. It was incredibly deep and the wind was freezing. The dog kept bounding ahead through the deep drifts, and they had a hard time keeping up. They struggled up the side of one hill, then the dog led them down the other. "I don't think you heard anything," gasped Sean. Lisa was starting to wonder herself, but she wouldn't turn back. "He's leading us somewhere. I know it," she insisted. They struggled up the top of the next hill. It was completely dark now, and there was a spooky forest just ahead. "We're gonna get lost out here," called Sean. "We can follow our tracks back," Lisa replied. Still, she wasn't so sure. She could barely see in front of her, and she was freezing. Then, the dog stopped. It barked. Lisa and Sean stared into the darkness. Suddenly, they saw it. There was a man lying in the snow. "Dad?" Lisa yelled. Lisa, Sean. It was their father. They ran to him and hugged him tight. He was shivering and his teeth chattered. "Thank heavens you found me," he gasped. "I got lost and I fell and twisted my ankle. But how on earth did you find me?" "The dog," said Lisa. "He led us to you." Their dad looked puzzled. "What dog?" Lisa glanced around. He was right here," she said. "The one who barked just now." Their dad shook his head. "I didn't hear anything." A strange, prickly feeling ran across the back of Lisa's neck. "Sean," she said, "give me the flashlight." He handed it to her. Lisa shone the light around. "See? There are his paw prints." They were paw prints, all right, but they only went as far as Lisa's dad. Then they stopped. The dog had disappeared. Sean and Lisa looked at each other. "This dog," said their dad. It wasn't... You didn't see what kind of dog it was, did you?" Lisa had the prickly feeling again. "It was a St. Bernard," she said. Their dad was silent for a long time before he spoke. "You remember about the gentleman who used to live in the cabin? Well, he had a St. Bernard." "But how long ago?" began Lisa. "That was 40 years ago," said their dad quietly. "And when the old man disappeared, no one remembered about his dog locked down in the cellar. It starved to death down there." Lisa and Sean shivered. And then, far away through the falling snow, they heard it. A strange, unearthly howl.
Wow, that dog.
It was waiting down there all those years, and it was still faithful.
Right, and when it gets out, it finally saves someone.
Only it's not the owner. It's their dad.
Cool story.
Yeah, Sam, that was terrific.
Thanks.
So who's next? Gary, you have one more story, don't you?
Yeah. Are you guys ready?
Uh-huh.
Go for it.
Okay. Picture, if you will, one of the most ordinary places you could imagine. Some place where everything is so normal all the time that it's hard to imagine anything weird ever happening there. No, not your living room. Not your backyard. This story takes place in a mall.
You mean like a shopping mall?
Pretty normal, huh? But sometimes it's the most normal places that can be the scariest. Because, well, they're familiar. Too familiar. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The Tale of the Mysterious Mall. Ever have the feeling someone was watching you? Denny and his kid sister Liz were clothes shopping at the mall with their mom. It was a crowded Saturday, and Denny was really hoping he wouldn't run into anyone he knew. But that was the weird thing. After a while, Denny could tell someone was watching him. Definitely. He stopped walking and shot a quick look over his shoulder. Liz crashed into him. "Ow," she said. "What's up?" "It's weird," said Denny, "but I feel like someone's watching me." They both looked around. People were milling through the aisles, pushing clothes around on racks. No one was even looking in their direction. Liz made a face. "You're nuts," she said. "Who'd want to watch you?" Denny shrugged and shook his head. But then, suddenly, He knew. It was a store dummy, or mannequin as her mom called them, standing right in front of them. It was a boy dressed in a purple striped shirt and jeans. "Wow," said Liz. "You're right. I mean, look at his eyes." It was true. The eyes look real somehow. "Oh man," whispered Denny. "And it's not just him." They looked around. There were dozens of mannequins all around them, all kids. And they all had the same horrible eyes, bright, glittering, and wet. "Look," said Denny under his breath. "They're all staring at us." Liz shivered. "Quit scaring me," she said. "Wait a minute," said Denny. "Where's Mom?" They looked around. She was gone. "It's okay," said Denny quickly. He could tell Liz was starting to freak out, and to be honest, so was he. "We'll just go to the manager's office. They can find her for us." The manager's office was at the back of the store. Behind the official-looking door, a pretty blonde lady was sitting at a big desk. At first glance, she looked friendly and kind. But closer up, Denny wasn't so sure. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "We lost our mom," said Denny. "Well, don't worry," the lady said. "I'll make an announcement. We'll find her soon enough." Liz sighed with relief. "Here," said the lady, smiling. "You can have a snack while you're waiting." And with that, she put a plate of cookies in front of them and poured 2 glasses of milk. Then she headed out. Denny looked at Liz. "I don't like her," he whispered. "Me neither," she said. "But these are awesome cookies." Cautiously, Denny tried one. They really were good. Big, soft-baked chocolate chips with no nuts. But he couldn't eat it. He still felt funny. Liz was already into her 3rd cookie and had drunk all her milk, too. Denny didn't even touch his. There was something about that lady he just didn't trust. "I think we should go," he said suddenly. He tried to stand, but could barely move. There was a strange roaring noise in his ears that got louder and louder, and flashes of light went off like fireworks. Everything went black. And Denny blinked. He was lying face down on the carpet. It took him a minute to remember where he was. Then he looked at his watch and gasped. It was almost midnight. "Liz," he said. The manager's office was completely empty. Denny went out into the store. It was like another planet. Dark, totally empty, and silent. Outside the glass walls, the rest of the mall was pitch black. "Liz!" He stopped to listen. What was that other noise? A rustling sound and a whispering. Denny strained his eyes. All around the edges of the store, there were dozens of shadowy figures slowly moving towards him. Who were they? The whispering was getting louder, but he couldn't make out what it was. "Hello?" One of the figures moved into a dim patch of light. It was a mannequin. Denny gasped. He could see them all now. There were dozens of them slowly shuffling towards him through the dark, their eyes wet and gleaming. They seemed to be whispering something, and they were getting closer. Denny tried to scream but couldn't. He backed away and tripped over a store display. Then he ran through the dark store. He crashed into a stack of shoeboxes and sent them flying. Behind him, the mannequins were getting closer and closer. There was a door with light showing around the edges. Denny grabbed the handle and yanked it open. Inside, it was brightly lit. The store manager was kneeling in front of a girl mannequin, buttoning its wool jacket. She spun around as Denny entered. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "You're not supposed to be awake yet." She didn't look pretty anymore. She looked like a witch. But Denny wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the mannequin. It looked exactly like Liz. The same brown hair, the same eyes, and as he watched, a tear formed in one of those eyes and slid down his cheek. Denny's heart was pounding. "What have you done to my sister?" "Sister?" The lady was smiling now, like she was pretending she wasn't mad anymore. "I haven't seen her around. But if you wait until I'm finished, we can go look for her. Then we'll call your parents." Her eyes glinted. "Poor thing. You must be tired and thirsty. Care for a little something in the meantime?" And with that, she held out a glass Denny stared at it. It was just milk, cool and white. But he remembered what had happened that afternoon. He and Liz had both eaten cookies, but only she drank the milk. And now, she was a statue and he wasn't. Behind Denny, the door bumped. The whispering was so loud it sounded like it was in the room. And Denny could finally hear what it was saying. Denny took the glass of milk. He lifted it up to his mouth as if he was going to drink it. But then he threw it into the lady's face. She screamed. She grabbed her face as if the milk was burning her and tried to attack Denny. But her movements were stiff and jerky. She was turning into a mannequin. Her mouth opened to scream one last time, but nothing came out. And there she was, frozen solid, her hands still reaching out like claws. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the air was full of voices, all laughing, shouting, and crying. The mannequins, dozens of them, came rushing in. Only they weren't mannequins anymore. They turned back into kids. And Denny was their hero. The girl mannequin was gone too. In her place was Liz, back to normal. "You saved me," she shouted to Denny. "You broke the spell." Over her shoulder, Denny could see what was left of the store manager. She was just a mannequin. Just a bunch of harmless plastic. Only something was odd. It was the eyes. They were bright blue, glistening wet, and furious.
Oh, man. So she was still in there.
You know, I always hated those store dummies. They always look like they're alive.
Thanks, Gary. I'll never be able to go to a mall again.
Me neither. But that was a great story.
They were all great.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's it. And to you guys at home, I hope you enjoyed sitting in. I declare this special meeting of the Midnight Society closed.
Hey, who's heading home?
I think I'll walk with you.
I think maybe we should all go together.
Hey, wait up!
See you next time.